This is Hal Herring with Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Podcast and Blast. We're here in Dover, Arkansas, and I've been traveling around looking at the Ozark Mountains and the Ouachitas.
Well, we didn't go into the Ouachitas. They're not far from here.
Okay, and seeing some beautiful country with a friend of mine, Johnny Carrol Sain, who I've wanted to come down here and meet for a long time and let him show me his part of the world. He's a freelance writer. This is how I met him. He worked with Field and Stream and does a lot of fishing writing for Hatch Magazine, Mid-Current. He's written for Farmer's Almanac. He used to be a farmer, right? You did.
Yeah.
You had a hog farm.
Yep.
And, done a lot of. You spent a lot of time in this part of the world, right? Your family goes back forever in here.
I've never lived more than 30 minutes from where I was born, which is about 15 minutes from here.
Right on. Well, after wandering around yesterday, so just keep this going. Johnny is a full-time freelancer. He's the editor of. Is it About the River Valley?
Yeah, About the River Valley magazine.
And that's a local, like, outdoors and
it's not just outdoors. It's more just telling stories about the region.
Right on.
River Valley region, southern Ozarks.
Yeah, I know you've done some good stuff at Arkansas Life.
Yep.
But I got on to your work, and I don't really know how we connected, probably through social media, but I got on to your work when I read some pieces you'd done, and I immediately recognized a person who, one, was bringing this huge life full of knowledge to the page, and for two, had somehow learned to, as you were talking about painting pictures with words, and they're pictures of a life deeply involved in the land, from turkey hunting to that piece you did called the Gar Hole.
Yep.
And that resonated so much with me because that's where I grew up. We were obsessed with gar. How do you catch them? How do you shoot them with a bow and arrow? Where do they live? What are they doing over there? Why do they do that? You know, and it's a species of fish. I guess it's kind of overlooked by people outside of the South, you know, or Texas.
Yeah.
But anyway, you did such a good job of it that I seek out people that I think are performing at a high level of art. We just did a podcast with an old friend of mine who teaches rifle craft, you know, and he's just taking that to a whole nother level. We got here yesterday. I got down here yesterday, and we did a long driving kind of tour of your part of the world. Mm-hmm. And let's talk about what it is. It's a fascinating place. You talk about the river, and that's the Arkansas River.
Yeah, yeah.
And it couldn't be any more different down in that Arkansas River than the mountains that we were in, than if you were on two different planets. I mean, I see why you've been here forever.
Yeah.
Because there's about 20 different, like, bioregions in one place where you can go and do totally different things.
There are. Where we're sitting right now, within 15 minutes, I can be in a smallmouth stream rolling out of the mountains. In another 15 minutes going south, I can be in the bottomlands, and right now it's probably the fields are full of snow geese and specks.
Yep, they were. I saw them.
Yeah. That's the beauty of living here to me. There's a lot of diversity. If you're an outdoors-minded person, you never get bored. There's always something going on. Not just consumptive pursuits with fishing and hunting, but just watching wildlife. It's a neat place.
Well, one thing, so you took me to the overlook there, the Dover, where you saw the Dover Lights.
Yeah, the Dover Lights.
What's that river in there?
That's Big Piney Creek.
Big Piney Creek. Mm-hmm. So it's like a blue. I mean, I'm trying to. It's very difficult. It blew my mind, right? Because you got these. They're big mountains too, big hardwood, mixed hardwood mountains, with no evidence of roads. You said there are 4-wheeler tracks in there, but you got a big gorge with the Big Piney in it, blue. Looks like a trout stream. I know it's not, but it's got smallmouth catfish.
Yep, smallmouth catfish, largemouth, spotted bass. And the blue in the winter, it has to do, I think, with copper in the water. I'm not positive, but something about the temperature of the water and the minerals in the water. In the winter, it's always that turquoise kind of look.
Yeah, I mean, it's really striking.
It is. It's striking with the woods being bare and brown.
up against that bare woods, and then there's a waterfall. You can see those rapids down in there, and each one got a fishable hole like right up under it, you know. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It was really calling me up.
Yeah, it does to me too.
Yeah, and just briefly, that Dover Lights thing is a phenomenon that you see off of that, especially if you're packing a lot of liquor. Huh?
Yeah, yeah. There's a legend, and there's a legend of. Well, it's not just a legend. I've been there, and I'm a skeptic, and I've seen lights.
Yeah. And what is those mountains?
Those are just Ozarks. I don't know. I mean, they're the southern region, the Boston Mountains.
But the Boston Mountains.
Yeah, that's what they call them, the region of the Ozarks.
Yeah.
And there's a legend there that it has to do with Native American tribes, has to do with old silver miners, ghosts of old silver miners. I don't know. I know I've been there. And I was of sound mind with no help from anything, and there were lights.
And the Dover Lights appeared.
They appeared.
Nice. Yeah. It's definitely a party spot where people seek them out. But I don't know. That's the Ozark National Forest, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the amount of public lands just visible from that one overlook is astounding.
Yeah.
And then where we drove, I don't know. I had no idea that this wealth of freedom like existed right here in this pocket of the Ozarks.
Yeah, we didn't really hit the borders, but we went around the eastern, the northern, and the western portions of the Ozark Mountain Range or National Forest. And I'm thinking, I know we talked about air stand, I did look it up. It's close to 1 million acres, maybe a little over. Within it, we said it's mostly hardwood, mixed hardwoods with some creek bottoms. Lots of deer, lots of turkeys, black bear, bobcat, elk. Now we've got elk in Arkansas, and in the northern part of the National Forest, Ozarks, there's some elk, and I don't know exactly how far south they've got. Actually, not far from here. I found sign not far from here.
Wow.
So again, it's a neat place. It's probably, I think, the wildest place in the state.
Yeah.
We went to Newton County, which is where my dad's folks are from, that side of the family, and I do believe that's probably the wildest place in the state. Low population, I think around half the county is national forest. It's where a large portion of the Buffalo National River runs.
Uh-huh. Is that the headwaters of the Buffalo?
The headwaters, I cannot remember. I think they start around there in Newton County. I'm not positive on that. Maybe Madison, but I think it's around there close. Some spectacular views in that. We didn't make it up to Buffalo, but spectacular views there.
I've heard about the Buffalo my whole life.
It's a popular place, especially in the summer. But you go there in the winter, and man, it's silent. And that's you can get there in places and not hear traffic, not hear trains, not hear anything. And to me, that's probably one of the most precious aspects of having that national forest in those areas like that.
Yeah, you bet.
I crave silence and solitude, and it's hard to find it. But up there you can.
Yeah. I know y'all we went to your uncle's store.
Yeah, my uncle's store.
And they've had that since 1916.
Actually, no. My grandparents started the store in 1948, I think, and then they built that building in 1967.
Yeah,
I think it's been there a long time.
That's an old school spot, man.
It's an old general store.
It's really far from everything, so it maintains it. So it's still you go in there and you can get hardware, or you can get beanie weenies or whatever whatever you need within. It's 45 minutes
either side, pretty much, and it's the only gas station, and it saved a lot of people's bacon coming down from the mountains. Didn't know if they were going to make it to town. He's got one pump. No, he's got two pumps there, but he's always got gas.
You can buy gas and firewood in the same spot. Yeah, it's way cool. I was looking. We were talking so much in there, but I looked over. He's got like an old 3-horse Johnson. It must be Johnson, boat motor.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I did. Yeah.
And I was. If we'd had more time, I was going to go over there and start messing with that and see what it was really old.
Yeah. He's turned in. I told you he's turned into Sanford and Son.
Yeah.
He goes to he goes to different estate sales and auctions and buys old stuff, and
he's got an eye though.
He does.
He's got. I was looking at that water pump. That hand pump out there, and that's something I'm looking for my garden. And I was just thinking, in Montana, it's harder to come by stuff like that because there's just less of it, right? And in that country, it's been inhabited by people. I don't know. There's weird stuff everywhere in the woods. Like you look at those old rock.
Yeah.
It's a spirit haunted piece of ground.
It is. And there's all kinds of little communities that used to be up there. We passed by a few, and I didn't point them out to you, but little thriving towns that aren't there anymore now are just, it's national forest.
Yeah.
And you can find signs of what once was there, but you have to look a little bit.
Yeah.
There's been people here for, well, my family goes back to Newton County, I think 5 or 6 generations.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's I think it has to do, and I think part of the writing that I started doing was being in the Southern Cumberlands, where it really does feel like the Dover Lights and stories like that you grow up with.
Legends,
They're legends, and then you go into these places where there's less people haven't been in say a century or 50 years and stuff, and you can feel that, And as a writer, I mean, that's what we deal in is legend, really.
Yeah.
When you're writing the gar hole, when pieces that I did back then are much more, they're much more of an older, I don't want to say Gothic, but they draw on an older tradition. And a lot of your work, I'm telling you, a lot of your work does that.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. It makes me feel good.
It was when you were doing that View from the Backroads column. You were. I know it's hard to monetize something like that, and you got to make a living. But that's what I could see that in there.
I appreciate you saying that.
I want to talk about that. You turkey hunt public land here.
Yes. And
whitetail hunt public land here.
Yes.
And then we could talk about the fishing forever, because I've been obsessed with smallmouth bass my whole life. And they were trophy game where I grew up. You didn't see very many of them. There's more now.
Yeah.
But you got red-eye bass in there.
Yep.
And I know you got working at Hatch Magazine and whatnot. Didn't they convert you over to fly fishing?
They did, and that was just 3 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. Chad Schmuckler, editor at Hatch, and actually Todd Tanner introduced me to Chad, and Chad had seen some of my work, and asked me about writing for him, and I said, well, hell, that'd be nice, but I'm not a fly fisherman.
Yeah.
He said, we can fix that. So I got an outfit, learned to cast here in the yard, and now that's pretty much all I do in the.
Yeah, I saw your pictures, but it's ideal for these small creeks.
It is. The smallmouth, it was actually it was a way to, weird as it may sound, a little more intimate connection with them.
Yeah.
There's more involved with catching fish on fly rod.
There is. Do you find that you catch as many smallmouth on the fly?
I do. I can't really see a drop off. Right. And I think a lot of that has to do with I'm throwing stuff that they haven't seen.
Yep.
Our creeks don't get a lot of pressure, but it's increasing.
Yeah.
And because people like me that write about them, and
yeah, I know.
then you get folks out there. But you throw a woolly booger or some poppers that they haven't seen before, and I think that may be the difference. But I haven't seen a drop off.
One of the differences, I guarantee you, is, and it's not immediately obvious when you convert from like 4-pound, 6-pound test spinning. You're casting all the time,
Yeah.
And with a fly rod, you definitely slow down.
You do, or you'll wear yourself out.
You wear yourself out, and that slowing down actually ups the number of fish you get. It's a strange. It does not seem to work, but it's true.
But that makes sense.
Yeah.
You're more particular about you're not just fan casting, shotgunning.
That's right.
You're really particular about where you're putting your fly, and that is true.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about that before. Maybe more, more methodical.
Yeah, more.
Think about it.
And you might catch more fish on a small Rapala than you will on a popper or whatnot, but I don't know if that's true, because I like I said, that slowing down and focusing is that fly fishing requires often produces more fish.
I'd agree with that.
It doesn't produce many fish as live drifting a minnow or a worm.
No,
I promise you.
No, but I think you're onto something about that, and I hadn't really thought about it.
Yeah. So in those creeks, like what is it, Bayou, Illinois?
We went Illinois Bayou. Yeah, that's
Bayou.
Probably the one I fished the most, which is there's 3 branches of it, and I fish them all pretty regular, and it's the closest to my home.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to call it a bayou because it's actually a rock creek.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like drops and shoals and all, and yet it says bayou on the sign when you cross it.
Yeah, we talked about
that. It's a smallmouth river.
It's a smallmouth river where it runs into the Arkansas River. I think when the first folk came up the Arkansas River and ran into that creek, it was swampy.
It's a swamp at the bottom, at the mouth.
At the bottom, yeah, and so that's where they named it. But you don't have to go very far up creek, I mean probably a mile or two, and it turns into something different. Yeah. And then it changes more the further it gets up in the mountains, of course. Yeah.
And there's gar and all of that come up out of the Arkansas. Yeah, if anybody never seen Arkansas, too, like, it is a classic. That thing goes from Colorado.
Yeah, it's a trout stream in Colorado.
Yeah. I mean, as I drive back and forth across the United States, I'm on the Arkansas at Pueblo, Colorado.
Yeah.
And then you think the water you're touching in that, and it's all beat up there at Pueblo, too. But at the water you're touching at Arkansas River is going into the Arkansas Delta.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
and then in the Mississippi,
thing.
yeah.
And
when you get down to where we are, here it's a catfish. Yeah. I mean, it's a river. It's where everybody goes to catch catfish.
Yeah. And that's towards Fort Smith?
Yeah. When you get, I don't know where the complexion actually really starts changing because I haven't gone upriver much. But I know here, catfish is the game. Of course, bass, we got Lake Dardanelle, which is an impoundment off the river, and it's nationally known for largemouth bass and tournaments. But it's a warm water, a robust warm water fishery here.
Yeah.
And that is compared to what it is in Colorado is kind of striking.
It blows your mind.
Yeah.
It's America, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that thing is it knits our country together, and people must have been traveling up and down that thing since the Ice Age.
It's been a trade route for a long time. Yeah.
So I used to stop at Fort Smith. When I've always been fascinated with a Cherokee outlaw called Ned Christie, who had his fort out on the other side of Fort Smith in the Indian Territory, and his rifle is at the museum in Fort Smith.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, and you got museum is incredible.
I need to go there.
That's where Tillman, Heck Tate, all of them started out as marshals in Judge Isaac Parker's court, and they struggled to kind of tame the Indian Territory. It did work after a long time. They lost out of 300 of them, I think 65 survived.
Wow.
And so that all launched out of Fort Smith right there on the Arkansas. And when you're at that museum, you can walk down, and there's always somebody catfishing with big, heavy gear.
Yeah.
Right there below the museum.
Yeah, they do. They use ocean tackle here, and in the tailwaters, though, you hook a 50, 60-pound
in that heavy water.
Yeah, you got to have the muscle to get it out.
Yeah, it's super cool, man. One of the things that struck me yesterday talking was you've been hunting this. You're steeped in the hunting in this part of the world. I mean, from day one, we were talking about your cycles in the year, squirrel hunting to turkeys to whitetails to, and then start fishing.
Yeah.
And it was a cycle that was totally familiar to me from any Southerner who's a serious outdoorsman knows that cycle, but one of the things that struck me was you said that you had killed one deer with a rifle?
Yeah. I've only killed one deer with a rifle.
And then like 100 with a bow, or
100 somewhere. I think I passed the century mark a couple years back. I don't know. I quit counting.
And the way you led into that was just amazing to me. It's like you were saved up. Tell me that story. You were saving up for something, and a buddy of yours bought like a bear.
Yeah.
Compound.
When I was 15. I'd been working for a while to buy bass fishing tackle because I was in the bass club, and Mom and Dad said they weren't going to buy me any more rods and reels. So anyway, I'd saved up surplus after fishing season, and I had a buddy that had a pair of bird dogs, and quail were in decline around here, but there were still a few, and I actually had my eye on a new Mossberg pump with a poly choke.
A 500 with the poly, yeah, man.
All I'd had was an H&R single shot 12 gauge, and so that was a big upgrade for me. And I was going to get into the birds, and then I had another friend at school that had just bought a bear. I think it was a polar. I don't think it was a whitetail. I think it was a polar.
I had the whitetail.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I went over and saw it, and man, something about the primal savagery. I don't know. I mean, it had wheels, but there was still something about it that was just very appealing. And I don't think I even shot it. I pulled it back and looked at it, and so I went home and decided I wanted to get a bow. So I ordered a compound bow from Bass Pro, and it was a bear, but I ordered the Bear Flare, which is a little more modern, had cams, which I didn't know what cams were, but they were supposed to be better than wheels, faster. So I ordered that and some aluminum arrows, and didn't know anybody that shot a bow other than my friend who didn't know anything either, and went out and promptly ruined 3 arrows in some plywood I was shooting into because I didn't know what else to shoot into.
Yeah. I was thinking fling them. I remember that.
And then I lucked onto a guy in the neighborhood or in town that knew something about bows, and he kind of guided me. And then, so I was 15 then, high school girls and trucks and sports and everything, kind of lost track of it. Always fished, but kind of got off the bow hunting thing. And then in my early 20s, I got serious about it. I picked up Bow Hunter magazine. And then started watching a few videos and trying to learn.
This is the VCR days.
Yeah, the VCR days. Yep. We'd go rent some hunting videos and try to learn a few things about it. And bow hunting around here, there wasn't anybody did it. I mean, I said that one guy I knew of and kind of pieced together, what I knew about it from reading. That was probably a big reason I'm a writer now is I learned a lot from those magazines. And then started shooting 3D tournaments. Had some friends around here. Bow hunting was picking up in popularity. Had the 3D tournament stuff hit with foam targets and shot tournaments for a few years. Got pretty proficient. And actually, before I killed my first deer, I'd shot tournaments for a couple years. I think I was 20 when I killed my first deer. We didn't have whitetail. And there wasn't any deer around here when I was a kid.
The first one I ever saw in Alabama, I was 14, and dogs had run it to death, or almost to death.
Yeah.
I was squirrel hunting.
Yeah.
And it staggered up in there, and I called the game warden. He said, you can kill it.
Yeah, because the only ones I saw were in front of a dog.
Yep.
And they were few and far between. And that's why bow hunting wasn't popular. There wasn't very many deer, and you couldn't waste all season, sitting in a tree waiting on one deer when you go out in gun season, chase them up with dogs.
Right.
But the deer population was growing pretty rapidly during that period. I guess that was the early 90s. I mean, it was starting to really take off. And I'd shot tournaments for a couple of years, I think, and I finally killed a deer with a bow.
Was dog hunting still legal when you
I think it was. It was just starting to fade out.
Yep.
The big population of deer, more deer meant more people were staying hunting and still hunting, and they were the dog hunters were rubbing those guys the wrong way, and so it was starting to fade out. I killed that first deer with a bow. I kind of had already in my mind I was going to do it. People told me I couldn't do it. That made me want to do it. So I killed
this.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
I'll show you. And so I killed one, and then ended up rattling off 13 with the bow before I finally went gun hunting again. And that was with my father-in-law just to really make him happy, and end up killing a deer. And I don't know.
That was shooting that old 30-30 you were talking about?
My dad, I had my dad's 30-30. He had a Model 94 carbine, open sights that he hunted with, and I killed it with that. And then
did it seem easy after bow hunting like that?
Yeah, it seemed really easy.
Didn't it?
That's why, and I don't want to be insulting. That is not my intent, but it it did. And the thrill, I told you, yesterday when we were talking, the thrill to me was getting close to the deer. How I killed it wasn't really important. So I don't know if it was the gun, except, when I saw the deer, he was in range, 75 yards. There wasn't anything else to do.
Yeah.
With bow hunting, 75-yard deer is, you're not going to kill that deer this time. So that was the appeal, and again, something about the whole getting close, the silence of the weapon, everything was just really appealing to me.
Yeah.
And so I've been bow hunting. So I'm 46 now. I got my first bow when I was 15. So ever since, every year, been pretty fortunate. Be able to put deer in the freezer, and that's mainly what we eat.
Yeah.
That's
what we had last night. Yeah. I've been lucky on this trip. Getting fed.
Yeah, we had venison chili last night.
Yeah, you were talking to some guy at the store. He's an old school, farmer dude who was an intense bow hunter. I overheard some of that. What was that going on?
We were talking about turkeys, actually. He's a guy that I've known. Danny Crow, and if he listens to this, and he'll notice the shout out. Lives in a little town, Hector, just up the road from me, and he's an avid hunter. We were just talking about turkeys.
Did he bow hunt turkeys?
No, he has, but I don't know if he still does or not, but he bow hunts deer, and our turkey population has been down a little bit. And,
right, that's what
we were talking about. I'd asked him if he'd seen any birds, and no, and the conversation turned to coyotes and hogs and all the other problems turkeys face.
And y'all are just now getting hogs, right?
We're just now getting hogs. I'm actually going to be writing a story about the hogs for a publication coming up. But yeah, the hogs have become a problem probably in the last 4 or 5 years. You can't really go anywhere in the mountains and not find hog sign. And besides, eating up the mast, they're rough on ground nesting birds of any type.
Yeah.
And turkey's got all kinds of problems. They don't need another one, but they've got it right now. And that's our big concern. Is actually probably the number one concern in the state right now is the hogs.
Yeah. Wow. I know y'all got a hill of crop of oaks, and I know some of the Forest Service is managed for pine up on the public lands. But I noticed yesterday just that oaks for miles, oaks and big hickories and beech.
Yeah.
I mean, the mast for those turkeys is there.
It's here. Last year, one reason the turkey season was a little rough for me and other hunters last year is we didn't have a good mast crop. We had I can't remember what it was. I don't think we had a specific weather incident that caused it to happen. It just didn't produce for some reason.
Yeah, well, I think there's years where they don't.
Yeah, they just didn't. Yeah. And gobbling was off.
Yeah.
If turkeys don't go into spring really fat and healthy, the gobblers tend to be a little more silent.
Yeah.
This last fall, we had good mast crop, so I'm thinking this spring they'll be gobbling. But yeah, our hills are predominantly white oak.
Yeah,
we got good stands of red oak. Hickory. Those are the food producers in the forest.
I noticed, I was looking at those leaves yesterday, and you told me it's a burr or a post on top.
There's post, usually on top of the ridges, the driest areas, you got post oak.
Right.
We got one big one here in the front yard.
Yeah.
We live our yard's a pretty dry area. It's there's not any groundwater, I don't think, right here close.
Well, what you see as you're transitioning over to those to the plains, I mean, you can definitely feel it. There's so much going on here, like with those bayous, with those shoal creeks like Big Piney and Bayou, Illinois, and then you got the big mountains, and then it's like this whole thing is also trending off to the Great American Prairies.
It is. You get up and really in the corner of northwest Arkansas, and to me it looks like the Midwest.
Yep.
You get up around Fayetteville and Springdale, where you're really out of we mentioned the Boston Mountain Range of the Ozarks, which is where the gullies or the hollows and the ridges are the most rugged. You get up more on a plateau. Of course, the whole Ozarks are really a plateau that's just been weathered down. But when you get up into Springdale and Rogers and Fayetteville, that plateau is a little bit bigger there. And to me, it does. It feels like you're getting into Kansas and Missouri and Oklahoma. It's got that feel to it.
Sure,
a more Midwestern.
You
feel.
definitely, and I mean, I've driven this so much, you can definitely feel it as you're driving northwest. It's just like the transition is really obvious.
It is.
It's really amazing. And so one of the things, you come into this, so you got a interest in kind of like a Phoenix story or a rebuild story where you were 41 or 2 right before you started writing and doing this. And just, I know y'all had a hard time, 2008 crash.
Yep.
And then you turned around, instead of going back to what you had, you rebuilt a whole new thing.
I did. Had a whole different life.
Yeah.
Had an insurance business and a convenience store and some rental property and some farmland, and kind of put all my eggs in one basket, 2008, and everybody knows how that turned out.
Yeah.
And so
the baskets were falling like mad.
They were.
Yeah.
And so I had an opportunity. That's how I looked at it. It was an opportunity to redirect my life, to pick another course. And writing was something I'd always wanted to do, but I didn't know any writers. And I thought you kind of had to be born with it. And not to say that there's not some, there is some things that you need to have intuitively, but at the same time, it's a craft. And as I had this opportunity, I started looking at writing as maybe something I wanted to do again. I dabbled with it a little bit in high school and college. And I started talking to writers, and Hal, you were one of the first ones I talked to, and through correspondence with you and other writers, I learned that it was a craft.
Yeah.
And if you have a little bit of ability, you can take that and build it and make it something more. And so I decided to go back to school when I was 40 years old. Went back to college. I'd already had some credits working toward a biology degree when I was there 20 years before. And I originally went back to be a biologist. That's what I decided I was going to do. And then I started writing for a few publications and had an editor. I had just asked one editor one time, I said, "Man, can I do this?" And he said, "Well, yeah, you can do it." And so that cemented it. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to change my major. Went into journalism, got a journalism degree with a minor in biology, and then just started pitching stories everywhere I could.
Yeah.
And then along that same route, though, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to write about, my thinking about hunting and fishing and the environment and pretty much everything that defined who I was started changing too. I read a book. I first read it when I was 35 and I was still selling insurance and making money and chasing big whitetails, and that was my thing. And I read a book by David Petersen, who some of you backcountry hunters and anglers folks may know. He wrote a book called Heart's Blood. I read it when I was 35, and it challenged a whole lot of my thinking about hunting, about animals, about environmental concerns. And the first time I read it, it pissed me off because it challenged me so hard. I put it down.
Before that, you just hadn't yet. Okay, so one of the things that we've been talking about in the South is this is the biggest fishing and hunting culture ever. I did this other podcast with these guys in Alabama and the Smokies, and it's everywhere you go.
Yeah,
there's somebody on their way fishing or hunting or coming back, or I was at a gas station, and this young man came up to me while I was pumping gas and started going through his phone. I didn't know what he was talking about. It was before daybreak.
Yeah,
and I guess I looked like somebody who would appreciate this, and I did.
Yeah,
and he came up. He was dressed for work, and the black guy, and he was talking to me, and I said, well, what you got? And he showed me this buck on his phone that he'd just gotten the day before, and he said it's going to be 7 degrees on Monday, and I'm taking off, and I'm going to get the other one that I saw in here. He said this place is on fire. And I'd never seen this guy before in my life, right?
Yeah.
And we sat there and looked at those deer, and it was a great connection to somebody who was just on fire with hunting. So knowing all of that, I always thought that the South would be the greatest conservation and environmental protection power in the United States. And you and I were talking about this yesterday. Is it people that just they have it, but they don't think about how they got it? Or you said it's mostly that all of us are involved in short-term thinking.
Yeah. And we've got the South, the best I've thought about it a lot. And like my thinking before, and a lot of hunters and anglers here, it's a really utilitarian attitude toward game and fish. And a lot of it has to do with, there's a poor area of the country, and man, it was a hand-to-mouth thing. You appreciated fish and deer because you could eat them.
Yeah.
My dad talked about gigging suckers on the creeks in February.
Yeah, red horse.
Yeah, they do a spawn and run.
Yep.
And fill the tater sacks, and
yep.
that's what they ate.
Yep.
So that was, that's the culture.
Yeah.
And that was my attitude. Of course, we ate the deer, and again, I got on a big deer kick there for a while, but it was still a very utilitarian attitude.
You mean a horns kick?
Yeah, big horns kick.
Yeah.
It didn't last very long, but the David Petersen book.
The poorer you get, the less the horns are fascinating. In my experience,
that's true too. Can't eat horns. That's
the poorer I get, the less I'm interested in them.
But the David Petersen book introduced me to a different way of looking at all of that, the hunting experience and the animals I was pursuing. And so that started changing my thinking about some things. I told you the first time I read it made me mad, and I read it 6 more times.
Yeah.
About the 4th time,
That's awesome.
It really started clicking, and stuff that he was saying was really making sense to me.
And can you give it to me short? Like what was it that hit?
Man, he was. Of course, David's a very honest writer. You and I talked about that, and some of his emotions.
He's one of the best.
He is some of his emotions. He talked about when he killed deer. He talked about killing a fawn mule deer one time. And he cried. He wrote about crying about it, but then he took it home and ate it.
Sure.
And he had a tough time eating it, but then he went through the whole process of how the cycle works. Yeah. And that in the natural world, fawns are usually some of the first to go to predators. And he gave me a more he put me in tune with the circle.
Yeah.
That circle of life that I hadn't really considered before, and how everything is connected. And that really, again, it was a process. I told you yesterday, I called it my road to Damascus moment, but it wasn't a moment. It was a process over years. And so I started reevaluating the reasons I was hunting and the reasons I was killing and what it meant to take a life.
Yeah.
And here I am today. I mean, that's the short version.
Yeah. And that book you told me, it introduced you to Ed Abbey. Mean, that was this is kind of what happened. This didn't happen to me. I grew up with the people handing me those books. I was luckier. Mm-hmm. But David Petersen introduced you to Abbey and Leopold.
Abbey and Leopold and Wendell Berry.
Yeah.
The guy that rode Blood Ties. Ted
Carasoti.
Introduced me to a lot of minds that actually, and I told you, they're my pantheon now. I mean, those are the people I turn to and read when I'm looking for wisdom about a lot of this stuff. But no, I'd never heard of any of them before.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about any of these philosophies, and it was shocking to me. One of the things that was shocking to me about David Petersen was that this attitude he had, this feeling of connectedness, real connectedness to the land and to the animals, was coming from a hunter.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that sounds strange now for me to say it because it seems like common. You should know that, but that connection wasn't really, I'd never heard it expressed like he did.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that really probably troubled me. I come from a background, I come from a Christian background, a fundamentalist background.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that troubled me, that we're all part of this. We're not separate from it. We're part of it.
Yeah.
That was shocking to me to hear it come from a hunter.
Yeah.
That's not the culture that I'm from.
Right. It's not dominionist.
No.
That's one of the things Petersen, under the surface of Petersen's work, and I happen to be right there in there with him.
Yeah.
I'm not as articulate as he is, I promise, but it's not dominionist. And, as a hunter, I don't want to get too far off on this and make people mad, but as a hunter, one of the first things I know, and having my parents have passed on, and I was there for all of that, is I would question our dominion. I don't see it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Out there in the woods and whatnot, people falling off and taking you down.
Yeah.
I think that I'm afraid that the Dominionist point of view is unsupported by the reality of facts on the ground. However, I'm willing to give it to other folks if it makes them, if they need that, or if they believe that, that's fine.
And personally, I feel more comfortable in the circle as opposed to looking down on top of it. That's where I'm at.
That's more powerful for me.
It is for me too.
Spiritually,
it is for me too.
Yeah, spiritually, that's more powerful.
We
could
go down lots of rabbit trails on that, but that's where I'm at. And then David Petersen introduced me to that. Luckily, I told you I've never spoken to the man, but I wrote him an email just a few months ago, actually, and finally got to tell him what his book meant to me. And I know as a writer, hearing from someone that you impacted, that's really a big deal. But I wanted to let him know, and it greatly impacted my life.
I can tell you and him would get along good.
Oh, I know we would.
Yeah.
We see eye to eye. From what I can tell, we see eye to eye on pretty much everything.
Yeah. Well, that's so that was like what you call the road to Damascus moment. And that is that where you decided to just rebuild things in a totally different direction?
Yeah, like I said, we'd already gone through the financial hell with 2008.
That's a good way to put it.
That's what it was. And so, it was a time where I was reevaluating everything in my life about what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And David's book that I had read years previously came back to me during that time. I think that was the fourth time I read it, was when we were going through that.
You were supporting the whole of your family at the time.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
I remember this story, and it's
rough.
It's a challenge.
It was.
It's a root hog or die moment.
It was.
Yeah.
And we pulled through now. Like I said, I finished college and am lucky to be able to put together a living writing and editing. And then my wife's going back to school. She'll be graduating with an undergraduate degree in December and then going on to master's school, or getting her master's degree, I'm sorry. And so, we've And she's changed her course too. It's been a family thing.
Yeah.
We look at things differently now than we did before.
Yeah.
So it was a good thing. And, you look back, and at the time you're going through it, but when you look back now, and it may have been one of the best things that ever happened.
Right.
So,
well, it puts you on a path that you're good at it, and it's satisfying to you.
It is extremely satisfying, and that is exactly, people have asked me why. Obviously, it's not like you're not going to get rich writing.
Right.
But, there's the sense of satisfaction of doing something that really matters, it feels like. Maybe, whether you do or not, I don't know, but it feels like
I think it does.
Well,
I think it can, but I mean, you and I have met because of your work and because of my work.
Well, yeah. Well, I look at David Peterson's book.
In David Peterson's book,
David Peterson wrote a book, that
Yeah,
changed me. And,
that's right.
going back even further, I've told you Gene Hill.
Yep.
If I hadn't met Gene Hill in the pages of Field and Stream,
right,
I probably wouldn't have read David Peterson.
Right.
And then I wouldn't have known Edward Abbey.
Right.
Or Aldo Leopold or Wendell Berry or
Right.
any of these other folk, John Muir, any of these folks
Yeah.
that have greatly impacted my life.
You put me on to Tom Kelly. I'm going to be reading that.
Oh, yeah.
That's a turkey hunting book.
Yes, Tom Kelly from
and that's
Mobile,
Alabama. Saying I'm totally ignorant of that, and now I got something new to look at.
You need to read Tom Kelly. He's one of my favorite writers.
So, have you always been a reader?
Yeah, I've always been a reader. Actually, always been a magazine reader.
Me
I never
too.
told you this. You'll get a kick out of this. And through I joined Bassmasters when I was 10 and started getting their magazine. And I was
get all that cool free stuff?
Oh, yeah. I got the spinnerbait, caught a 5-pound bass on spinnerbait.
Yeah. I got the Man's strawberry worms.
Did you?
In the blackberry flavor. Yeah. And I was like, you'd hold, I was probably 8.
Yeah.
And he'd hold those strawberry or those blackberry worms, and they had that scent in them.
Yep, I remember that.
Man, that was the best package of free stuff ever.
I got the auger tail, and I think it was black grape, and it had that FS454 scent on it. I remember. I joined them, and I got the magazine, and I started buying magazines. Yep. I bought Field and Stream. Dad had a subscription to Field and Stream and to the National Rifle Association's American Hunter.
Yep.
And
so y'all got the Hunter and not the Rifleman?
Yeah, we got the Hunter and the Field and Stream, and then I would buy any other hunting magazine I could get. And at last count, I think when I was 18, I had a stack of 2,500 magazines.
Wow.
Piled up in my room. I knew several writers. I didn't have to see who wrote it, their byline. I knew who it was. I knew Gene Hill. I knew Chuck Adams. I knew Miles Keller. I knew one of the Arkansas legends, Keith Sutton. I knew a lot of those guys just from their writing, and I read the stories that really resonated with me were the experience stories. Yeah. Not about how to kill this. I mean, that helped me, of course, while I was learning, but the experience of what they saw and felt and learned while they were out, in the woods or on the water. That's what I read a lot of. I read some other books and stuff, but the magazines was really a big draw to me from a really young age too.
Wow. Yeah. And that started with Bassmaster.
It started with Bassmaster.
Yeah, I did too. I swear I ain't that far from it. I loved that Bassmaster magazine.
Yeah, and, Adventures of Charlie and Harry. I always read that first. I think.
That was the one that was hand illustrated.
Yeah. I think that's an Arkansas. I think it's Cliff Shelby that drew that. I think he's an Arkansas boy. I'm not positive on that though.
Well, you were steeped in it before you ever knew that's what you were going to do.
It's kind of a surprise that it took me as long as it did, I think, to get to this point. Because everything then was really pointing to it. Again, I just know anybody that wrote. I didn't know you could do that to make a living.
Right. Well, you had a pretty good background. I did too. We had fur fishing game, and we had also, for a while, I did full cry. I know that one. Yeah. I used to buy some fur fishing game. Yeah. And your daddy was a coon hunter, you said.
He grew up coon hunting and squirrel hunting. There wasn't a lot of deer back then, so squirrels and coons. And then I know he told me, like, my grandpa, it's probably not cool nowadays, but my grandpa would shoot the robins when they came through, and they ate those.
And they ate the robins.
Yeah, ate the robins when they came through.
My sister had a friend out on the Outer Banks, and her father had a refrigerator full of cedar waxwings when they were growing up.
Yeah,
and I don't know how he killed them or anything, but they had a name for them and everything, and they're there.
Yeah, I've not heard that.
Whatever came up, this lady in Colorado one time answered a buddy of mine. He said, "What did y'all eat like in this really, really hard country, you know?" Mm-hmm. And she said, "Whatever came up in the yard." Meaning plants or animals.
Yeah, I think that's what my folks did.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a little business there, but still, there was nobody in the county.
Supplemental, man.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, so that tradition, you didn't coon hunt that much, though, right?
No, I never have coon hunted.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've always been drawn to more solitary outdoor stuff.
Yeah.
Deer hunting, turkey hunting, where you might go with some boys, but you split up, when everybody really gets serious about hunting.
Yeah.
My dad, I think, was a little more, he liked to hang with folks, and I'm just not like that.
Sure. So I think that's part of what people enjoy. I think that's part of I bet it's fun. If you love it, I bet that's a big old deal.
I bet it is too. And, he grew up, dogs. We always had dogs, but hunting dogs were really a big part of his heritage. He always had a dog that would tree coons or squirrels.
Yeah.
And growing up, we deer hunted with dogs.
Yeah.
So just hearing, I know when we would deer hunt, he would talk about the music of those hounds,
right? Gotcha.
Through the hollows, and to him that was just good killing a deer. We'd set up on the ridge and just listen to him chase.
Wow.
And
did people have feist dogs too?
Yeah, they did. They had I think he had a feist. Now, what did he have? He had one old dog he called Gouger when he was a boy, and I think it was a cur. But I know people do have feist. Yeah, they did then.
I've still been looking for this guy down the Pascagoula River who hunts in Mississippi, who hunts with these feists. He's obsessed with them. And it'd make a interesting conversation because they got these huge hardwood tracks down in there. Nature Conservancy's done a lot of work down in there, and they hunt. They're obsessive squirrel dog hunters. And I hadn't found him again. He's friends of friends,
That culture, that squirrel dog culture, is here too, and it revived pretty strong. Probably about 10 years ago, and it's still going. It's not like it was, but there's still quite a few folks that squirrel hunt with dogs.
Well,
and it's just it's that whole connection. I get it. Again, that's not really my thing, but I get the connection between the hunter and the dog, and that's an old connection. I mean, that goes back Pleistocene, times.
You bet.
So I get it. It's just not something I've ever really been into.
Yeah, my dog is so tired of this trip I'm on. He sits there in that car. All he wants to do is go back home and either go ice fishing with my son or go hunting. I know a dog doesn't actually think, in that way.
Yeah.
But he knows he's missing something driving with me, and we have some fun, But it ain't as much fun as he has at home.
No, and that's a long old haul for a dog.
So, what's next? You working? I know you're doing. So let's talk about some of the issues in your region. And without getting you into trouble,
I'm already in trouble.
I know that, but you're working on some hog farming stuff in the headwaters of Buffalo. Is that right?
Well, it's on there's a hog farm. Let's say the Buffalo River we talked about earlier is in Newton County, and it's our nation's first national river. And it's kind of
it's a wild and scenic.
It's a wild and scenic, and it was the first designated national river.
Interesting, I didn't know that.
Yeah, in 1972. Well, they were going to dam it and make a lake up there, and then some folks. No, this ain't going to happen. And we got some guys in Washington on board, and got that taken care of.
It's amazing to me. My sister said one time she sent me some kind of plan they had for this Disney World type thing off the Outer Banks, right in those hurricanes, and she just put on there. She goes, "Busy little minds can never stop thinking."
Yeah,
of something new to tear up.
That's right. And it's one of them. That whole area there.
I mean, you couldn't pick a worse place to dam up and make a lake.
I told you in Arkansas, it's probably one of the wildest places, and to sacrifice that for there might have been some economic gain, but that's you never know for sure what that's going to turn into. But folks fought it. Luckily, it was before I was a year old, I guess, when it was designated.
Yeah.
And so that was saved. But now they built a hog farm, 6,000 head hog farm. Now, I think 2,000 sows, and then when they got pigs, little pigs, is all told 6,000. On the close to one of the tributaries. And it's in a town a little community, actually, that my family, it's where both of my paternal grandparents are from. Mm-hmm. And everybody, you can't go in a cemetery and throw a rock and not hit a headstone to someone I'm related to.
Yeah.
Everybody knows my name, knows who I am. I'm actually related to one of the farmers that has the farm. And there's been a big stink there, very similar to what happened when they were going to build the lake as far as sides, and
people taking sides.
People taking sides, and it's been a flashpoint for cultural divisions. It's been a flashpoint for property rights versus, the whole thinking and the truth that, what happens here will go downstream.
Right.
And without getting into too much of the science of it, it's just a bad deal in the mountains. The whole Ozark Mountains, I told you before, are a plateau, and they're made out of water, for the most part, water-soluble rock.
Okay.
Limestone is the main one. And it's the reason the Ozarks have springs, they have sinkholes, they have caves, we got that crystal clear water. That's the reason. Anything you put on the ground, on the top of the soil, is going to get into the groundwater and in the creeks pretty quick. It just drains down and goes there quick.
And you told me yesterday that y'all have a real problem with E. coli already out in the headwaters that are protected in the national forest. Y'all swim in, and do all that stuff. Tell me about that before we go back.
We were looking at the bayou, and the three branches of the bayou, the East Fork, North Fork, and Middle Fork, all start in the national forest, and we swim in the creeks a lot. That's where we swim.
So everybody else, too.
Yeah,
I saw all the parking places, and
that's where a lot of people around here do it. But we don't go anywhere below the national forest. There's another creek just to the west of us, Piney. That's the one we saw at Dover Lights. Every summer it runs through some farmland, and causation doesn't equal correlation, but it's always got E. coli warnings every summer.
Yeah.
The bio is not monitored as closely, so you don't know as much about that. But I know when you get up in the headwaters, there's no farmland. You get before you get out of the national forest, it's not hitting any farmland. So that's where we swim.
What we saw yesterday down on that bayou, Illinois, is that where, am I saying that right?
Yeah, Illinois bayou.
Illinois bayou. They were channelizing. They had the heavy equipment in the creeks that are tributaries to that beautiful creek.
Okay, now you were talking about, was that might have been Hacker. I don't know.
It might have been Hacker,
anyway, or Point Removed. But
Point Removed is where
that's
we're
we're
at.
Yeah. And that's a creek that's actually, it's one I fish quite a bit. It's got smallmouth, or it doesn't have smallmouth, has largemouth and spotted.
Yeah.
And it's a creek that, and I told you I'd met a guy working for ADEQ there that told me that the water quality was horrible.
Yeah.
I was wading in it, and he was telling me how bad the water quality was.
But you can't do like what we saw yesterday. And this is where we got on that why in the South a conservation voting block and power. Which I still ain't got that answer, but you can't do what we saw with that heavy equipment draining those fields into that creek and not expect to have some trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, if it wasn't E. coli or agricultural chemicals, it would just be mud.
Well, here's an excellent story, and I started to tell you this yesterday. I don't think I ever did. We were talking about the buffalo, and my uncle up in Newton County told me not to get involved in that fight.
Right.
We talked about,
and I understand.
Yeah, the cultural thing with me being related to everybody. One of the things in Southern culture, and especially in the mountains, is you don't mess with another man's way of making a living, especially if he's related to you.
Right.
And it don't matter what's going on. If you don't like it, you just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
But I didn't listen to him. And but he and I have talked about it a lot since then, and he's a thinker. So one day we sit down, and his concern was, property rights, and this has always been kind of an agrarian area, mostly animal agriculture, but I said, well, what do you want for Newton County? What do you want Newton County to be 20 years from now? He said, well, I want it to be like it was when I was a kid. He said, I want to be able to go wherever you want to go. And that's where you can still do that. It's mostly a lot of national forests, and everybody.
Yep.
Purple paint don't mean anything there.
Purple paint's no trespassing.
Yeah,
here.
Purple paint, no trespassing. But everybody knows everybody, and if they know you, so you can go anywhere you want to. And he said, I want one of the other things was he said, I want to be able to drink out. He said, when me and your dad were kids and we'd go hiking and camping, he said, we never brought water bottles. And I said, I knew I had him here. I said, you did? And he said, no. He said, we used to drink out of the springs in the creek. And I said, well, why can't you do that anymore? And he had never answered me. Yep. And it's been 4 years and he still hadn't answered me. Yeah. Every time I see him, I ask him about that. And he said, well, I'm still thinking on that. So there's some level of cognitive dissonance. Yeah. There's some, he knows, and a lot of folks there, they know there's problems. It's not like it used to be as far as water quality, soil quality, other stuff. But at the same time, that's butting up hard against that culture that you don't knock folks that are making a living in the way they're making a living. Yep. So that, I think, probably is in a nutshell what's going on in the South. That's a lot of it.
I think you're right. I think you're right, and that's a complicated one for me because I too am a person who likes to live and let live. Yeah, and want my property rights respected. We Scotch Irish and German to the bone, like we were talking about yesterday. And just that I'm there.
Yeah, I do too. I respect it. Yeah. But at the same time, like I said, everything goes downstream. Yeah. And those guys know it. I mean, like I said, my uncle knows it. He knows that's why they can't drink out of the creeks like they used to.
The dissonance is in us all. That's a good way to put it. Mm-hmm. It's the dissonance is there. It's conflicting, deeply held beliefs. Yeah. My deeply held belief is that those people ought to stop channelizing them creeks down there, for God's sake, and leave that and let that bayou and Point Remove Creek be all it can be. And at the other point, if it was my land,
you want to do what you want to do. I understand, and I deal with the same thing. Yeah. I mean, again, you and I share cultural. Yeah. That we come from the same culture.
You do, yeah.
So I understand that completely, and that's the crux of the problem.
But it is different when you throw in 6,000 hogs up there. It is when you got 12 at your house for a butchering in November.
It is, and that's a whole other can of worms, But that's one of the things I'm working on a big article right now about the whole confined animal farming industry in Arkansas. Yeah. And in that, I'm going to look at what the difference is between raising a few head of hogs, to sell to friends and neighbors, local market versus, selling. You're basically growing pigs that there'll be a few people that eat local, but not many. They're going out everywhere else. Right. And the money's not staying here either. Not much of it. Right. Basically, what's staying here is pig crap. Yeah. On some soil that's not used to having that many nutrients. Yep. Really close to a creek that runs into a river that a lot of people spend money to come and see.
Yeah, and they love it.
They do. Newton County, 20-30% of their income is tourism, and they have 1 million visitors to the Buffalo River every year. Yeah. Is that worth sacrificing for? Again, and these are folks making a living. I get it on their land, but is all that worth sacrificing for this one operation?
Right. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that if there's a role, we got on all this yesterday, but if there's a role for government, it is to both protect that river and incentivize that landowner, not bring the awful hammer down on them, but which will just cause you to be. Have you ever seen a movie about Austin, Texas called The Unforeseen?
I have not.
Okay, I think Robert Redford made the movie or financed the movie. It's about the attempt to protect Barton Springs from this enormous amount of pollutants coming off a limestone aquifer where it was all this development of these old ranches. And the people of urban Austin simply outvoted the people who are developing that property out there. And with horrible results. Because the people out there got mad and formed a political structure, an unbeatable political machine that said never again. And it changed the politics of Texas, Austin, for a long time, the power structure, and not for the benefit of the environment, because they had pissed them off. You got to look at it because it's a fundamental document of how things can go wrong when you think you're winning on behalf of, the right.
Yeah. Don't get caught up in your own idea of your righteousness.
Yeah, the righteousness was not, was a thin, it was thin at that. It did, once the powers were tested, the righteousness had deluded people into thinking they were going to come out on top. And in my opinion, they were right.
Yeah. But that didn't help.
But it didn't help in the long run.
No, and that's where we're at there, and you got a good point.
It has to be an incentive.
And that's part of the problem there, too, with both sides of this, and I've talked to the cultural divide there between the hog farm is the Ozarks had a rush of folks in the 70s that were back to the landers, that were leaving a lot of places in the Northeast especially to come here for a simpler life. And there was they weren't getting away from everybody looking over their shoulder about what they were doing.
Sure.
Just like people go to the mountains ever since they started going to the mountains.
Yeah. And the people who settled in the mountains too.
Yes, that's why, my folks came here that same way.
How about you just leave me alone?
Yeah, I want to get I don't want government bothering me, so I'm going to get as far away from government as I can. I'm going to go west. So it was the same thing, but they also brought a different culture, a different set of politics, and like the difference, and it was a clash. Really, it's kind of funny because they share a lot of the same ideas about things, the Scots-Irish culture here and the Back to the Landers, but there was just a clash there. And even today, those Back to the Landers are the ones that are mostly opposing the hog farm. And the generations-long folks there, my family, they still see those Back to the Landers as outsiders. Yep. They've been there 40, 50 years, but they're still outsiders. Yep. And so that's where a lot of the clash is. It's not even about what's really going on, the science.
Yeah.
It has to do with the culture. Yeah.
Wow.
Your folks, same as mine, we don't want outsiders coming here telling us how to do things.
Nope. It's a recipe for fury.
Exactly.
Even if the outsiders might be closer to what you usually believe.
That's true. But you're not from around here.
Right.
You're not coming and tell us how to do stuff on our land.
Yeah.
And again, I get that.
Yeah.
But that's where a lot of this is coming down to.
Yeah.
And again, and a lot of the science and the reasonable talk gets lost in that cultural clash. Yeah. And that's very interesting to me. That's just as interesting as any other facet of what's going on up there.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I was watching that O.J. Simpson documentary, and during the riots, they have the original Rodney King quote, and Rodney King had every right to be like furious, but he was just so saddened. And he said, "Why can't we all just get along?"
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and just be a.
And the truth is, we can't all the time.
No, it seems today too that the problem is that, boy, I don't want to get too political here, but there's a group that doesn't want to admit there's problems.
Yeah.
When there absolutely are. I mean, you can't deny that there are problems.
Right.
What we shouldn't be arguing about whether or not the problem exists. We should be arguing about a solution.
I know, man.
But that's not what we're doing.
Right.
And that's kind of what I see. It's, what's going on in the Buffalo or on the Big Creek with that hog farm. It's kind of a microcosm of that.
It is. And it's killing us because I go back to that incentives deal. Like, we could be coming up with incentives to put hog farms away from the tributaries of the Buffalo River and to somehow compensate those who give up their operation for the better of the river. They deserve our help and our appreciation, because it's their land.
Yeah.
It's just that is being lost. That thought right there is like 3 steps removed from the fury of the argument.
It is. People are trying to fight fire with fire, and you don't fight fire with fire. You fight fire with water.
Right.
You come at it a different way.
Yeah.
And that's not. And again, that's what's happening all over with a lot of our environmental issues.
What else do you see around here that is a problem for the future here? Y'all don't have extreme urban sprawl.
No, it's not bad. And part of that's because our economy is just not really great.
Right.
We don't have a lot of great jobs, so no, that's not a problem. And especially where I'm at now, there's parts of the state, Northwest Arkansas, it's growing by leaps and bounds. One of the fastest growing areas in the country.
Yeah.
But where I'm at here, it's still going at a pretty slow pace. I think we went to my hometown yesterday, Adkins, and it's grown by maybe 1,000 people since I left 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Just what we looked at yesterday. I mean, someday somebody's going to figure out that that's a cheap place to be. Like, how it's such cool architecture.
Yeah, old houses
and that old cotton economy with
Yep.
those that incredible bank building. That is repurposed.
Yeah, it's a house right now. Yeah, the old Bank of Adkins. It's a house there in downtown. But no, that's the biggest problems we face. Probably now, there's one right here in my backyard, and we passed a pipeline, a diamond pipeline, going through 3 of my favorite creeks, which it's really making me angry.
Yeah.
There's some really, really old laws on Arkansas books regarding I can't think of the
eminent domain.
Yeah, eminent domain that this energy company, this pipeline company has found loopholes. And so this is not just an environmental issue; it's also a property rights issue,
right? Which
is kind of surprising to me that where we are in very libertarian Arkansas, that there's not more people up in arms about this pipeline ramming through people's property with little to no compensation, and whether they want it or not.
Yeah.
That's one of the big things. Other than that, the usual smaller stuff, even though we do have a lot of public land, there's, I don't know what the percentage of private land is in Arkansas, but we have a lot of wildlife and habitat on private land. And some practices that benefited wildlife in the past, unintentionally, grown up fence rows, fields left in native grass, just left to go wild.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen much anymore. That's one of the reasons we've seen decline in bobwhite quail. Game and Fish is, hats off to them. They're on top of that now, and they're actually trying to do some stuff on public land to help habitat.
Cool.
Feral hogs.
Yeah.
I think that's the big one. I'm digging into that story coming up the next few weeks, and I'll learn more. But I know that feral hogs were unheard of when I was a kid. There were some in South Arkansas, but around here there were none. And now you can't go anywhere in the mountains without running into pigs or sign. Creek fishing, I've run into them 2 or 3 times this past summer, herds of them on the creek. They are just a terrible. I mean, they not only do they
no upside.
No, there's no upside other than something else to eat, which a lot of these boys, they appreciate that. And when they first came in and they were a novelty, that was pretty cool. But now it's just, they're a pain.
Yeah, the only upside I know is one of my favorite dogs, blackmouth cur, Catahoula cur. They were kind of disappearing, back when I was 20.
Yeah.
And now that the hogs have run them up, there's Catahoula curs and beautiful yellow blackmouth curs everywhere,
Yep.
Bay dogs, catch dogs, and then the little pit bulls. And
part of the problem,
the dog world has benefited.
Yeah. But part of the argument, or the I don't know how much hard evidence is here, but that whole hog dog culture and hog hunting is one of the reasons they've spread. People have brought them up. Yeah, I know. And you can't find, of course, it's hard to find hard evidence on this, but there's strong suspicions that folks wanted to hunt hogs, so they just brought them up from places they were and turned them loose.
Yeah, you remember bucket biology, where they take a bucket load of fish and put them somewhere.
If you wanted this fish in your lake, you went and put some in there.
It's like sack biology.
Yep. I don't have an official word, so I'm not going to say that such and such agency or whatever told me this.
Yeah.
But that's a strong suspicion.
Sure.
And I can see that. So, that's part of the problem. But other than that, we still live in a great place here.
Yeah, what we saw yesterday is big and rich.
It is. And I've told you, Christine, my wife, and I have talked about moving off, but I don't know if I could ever leave here. I can go to the river bottoms and Hollow Bend National Wildlife Refuge, and I bow hunt there a lot. And see big deer, may not kill them, but I'll see them and have, watch rut chases. And then I can go there. We went over there last week and saw just rivers of snow geese coming down.
Yep.
Mallards everywhere, bald eagles. I don't know how many other critters we saw. And then you can go to the mountains and you can, you go far enough to see elk. It's full of white-tailed deer. It's not like the bottoms, but there's plenty of deer there. Turkeys. I I don't know where else I could go. And smallmouth bass in the creeks.
I know it's incredible. It is. Then you drop down and fish those big cats.
I can go fish for smallmouth in the mountains, and I can drive 20 minutes further south and fish for big cats in the river.
Yeah.
Or go down there. Actually, I started fly fishing for drum on the river, which is pretty
drum. I read
cool.
that piece of
so which are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So
did you eat any of those?
I don't, and I've heard that. I haven't heard that they're good eating.
We ate some this year, and part of it was I read your piece, and we went over and on the Missouri near Loma, Montana, or Fort Benton, and I caught. That's all I was coming up with, and they're not as big up there. They don't get as big up there, but we stripped them out. They're hard as a rock, but they eat mussels. So they're good.
Yeah, they
were totally good. There's not a lot. There's a lot of killing for not a lot of meat.
Well, maybe that's what I'd heard about it. As I said, I heard they weren't good, and I don't know if I'd heard that or that was there just wasn't a lot to get off of it.
It's not a lot to get off of it. Yeah.
But no, I haven't eaten them. And now that is another one of our environmental issues. I don't eat many fish out of the river because game. You're not supposed to eat so many fish with mercury. We've got problems with mercury. You're only supposed to eat, or it's advised that you only eat so many servings of fish per month. That is probably. I forgot about that. I know. I thought about that. Man, what didn't Edward Abbey say something about a country that you can't drink the water and the rivers, and there's something I forget what his exact quote was.
Tom McGuane had one said, "If the trout are lost, we smash the state."
Well, I think it's a sad state of affairs, that you can't go fill a stringer full of catfish or drum or whatever you want and eat them without worrying about your health.
Yep.
Out of our river.
Yeah, that's the story that got me in so much trouble back in the old Bush days. Was coal-fired power and the maximum achievable control technologies, and the story was titled "Don't Eat That Fish." In a Field and Stream piece.
Oh, I bet that did get
and some. It did. It caused so much trouble. And I don't think we foresaw it causing trouble because it was so obvious to anybody who fishes, and especially like poor people who want to eat fish and live that way all the time. And I grew up around those people that were fishing for a sack of fish to go have a great fish fry that they couldn't afford otherwise, it was accepted that's what we're doing today, and nobody could have imagined that they would say, "Don't eat that. Those are poisonous."
My grandpa was
Lord
the same,
have mercy.
On Point Remover, we went. I told you my grandpa took me fishing down there, and he ran trot lines on that, and that we did. Man, my maternal grandfather. That's all he did was fish.
Yep.
And to say that you could only eat so many fish a month, that would have. He'd probably went to somebody with a billy club. I mean, and that's really why aren't we reacting like that now?
Right. I do not understand.
It's become so. I mean, it's just a given, and people don't even think about it.
Right.
And I don't know if probably not many people adhere to that rule. If they're serious about eating them, they're going to eat them.
They don't.
Then damage be done.
Yeah.
But for me, we're thinking about that, and so we don't eat many. I eat some bluegill. If I catch them up in headwaters, where I know they're not getting contaminated, we'll eat them. But
we eat the heck out of them out of Missouri, and caution be damned. But I don't eat them all. We only get over there 4 or 5 times a year, so we do bring back as many cats as we're legal, and we've been eating those drum and walleye come out of there, and they're so good.
I've never eaten walleye.
There's a slab of meat on a walleye that looks it's like 2 inches thick. I mean, it's just a bit. It's one of you cut that fish and you just go, holy smokes! Look at that piece of meat.
Is it as good as crappie?
It is. It's just crappie is the top of the chain to me.
Yeah,
in the South, and walleye and yellow perch. And if you cut a yellow perch and you cut a walleye, you'll notice that they're really close kin. Yeah. I don't know that. I'm not.
They are. They're both. Yeah, they're very close kin.
So they that's why a big yellow perch is one of the most beautiful eating fish in the world. And the difference in a crappie is that the fillets are much thicker, But for eating fish, crappie's the top of the food chain in the South, and walleye's the top, in my opinion, up where we are.
I don't fish for them, but I can usually finagle a sack of them from some of my other buddies that fish for them. Yeah. Man, oh man, yeah. One of the best meals I ever had. I went to Missouri turkey hunting, and we didn't have any vegetables. Well, we had morel mushrooms.
Yeah.
we had crappie out of Lake of the Ozarks and turkey breast and morel mushrooms.
Wow.
And lots of beer.
Almost paleo.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, around campfire. That was one of the best meals I've ever had.
Yeah. I noticed. I was looking at your shirt, the Heflin, Alabama Turkey Calls.
Yep.
Shirt, Woodhaven.
Woodhaven Calls. Yep.
Yeah. And so y'all do roam a field.
I do.
Y'all roam from state to state to some extent.
I used to do it a lot. I haven't done it in a while, but I used to turkey hunting. I'd start. There were a few years we'd start in Alabama in March, and then I'd always hunt Arkansas in early April, and then go to Missouri or Kansas for late season. Well, I don't do it as much anymore.
That sounds like a fun trip.
It is.
Man.
It's always fun. Yeah. I had always had good friends to go with. Now I really got so. I don't know, something about them mountains, and in the spring, the Ozarks, I don't ever want to leave it. And it doesn't really matter if I kill a turkey. I usually am able to take off for a few days, and I'll just truck camp. I'll sleep in bed in my truck and roam all over the hills and go to places that have names like Rattlesnake and Raspberry Knob and Tag and Indian Creek and all these. You talked about the spirits in the mountains, these old settlements maybe, or places that people named years ago. All of that, to me, is just so that whole experience of going to those places and just being in the spring woods in the mountains is so rich that I don't really want to go anywhere else. I know that sounds crazy, but
it doesn't.
Kansas was, when I was traveling to kill turkeys, Kansas is like a video game. Turkeys everywhere, and nobody was hunting them back then, so they were pretty easy, and you'd kill your limit pretty quick. Missouri was full of turkeys. Alabama, I told you, was tough, but we always found birds. Yeah. And now, my spring, I think about the red buds fading out and the dogwoods coming on, and it's up there. I'm not going to tell you exactly where, because they might be listening, but so near those places I named. That's where I want to be, and when that's over, I don't really want to go after turkeys anymore. I'm ready to fish then.
You got it.
Those are my. I don't know. It's weird. As I'm getting older, there's less emphasis. There's not nearly as much emphasis on actually bringing something home other than the experience. Yeah. The only thing I guess on deer, we eat deer, so I have to fill the freezer with deer. Yeah. But the turkeys are they are a spiritual thing. I mean they're a connection to my heritage. My dad. Growing up there, and I think I told you, south part of Newton County down here, I'm related to about everyone. Yeah. That's country that I've known since I was a kid. That Dad showed me. That my uncle's taking me on it. That's where I want to be. Yeah.
It's a deepening, and there's a thing of years ago somebody said as I get older I'm trying to perform more like a laser than a shotgun.
Yeah. Yeah,
and I've really took that to heart. Yeah, I haven't got there yet with myself, but I understand that completely. It's a deepening rather than being like the Powder River, inch deep and a half a mile wide.
That's it exactly. I'm reading a book, boy. This is gonna get right there. I'm reading a book by Alan Watts. Yeah, and he's a Zen Buddhist. Yeah, he talked about. Love comes from the depth of understanding. Yeah. And if you spread yourself, like you said, all those other places are really neat and cool. And I definitely want to go back to some of them. I want to go to Louisiana and catch more redfish. Yeah. The places I want to go. But this place here is a place that I love. And I want to know it even more, even deeper, so that I think that connection grows even stronger. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is.
It's like Jim Harrison wrote that thing, about being married. It's or having a family. You'd like to have 100 wives or whatever, 100, but that doesn't really work.
Yeah, that's actually the analogy that Watts used was talking about polygamy. Mm-hmm. He said you can't really. That's not really love. Because you can't, you're spread too thin. You're basically,
yeah. It's fascinating. And I definitely, Wendell Berry was in Lee Metcalf little wildlife area in the Bitterroot many years ago. And I went down there, and he was reading there. And he said, I look at the Bitterroot Valley, I look at these mountains, and I go down the river. And he said, I think, wow, I could have a life here. And he said, but I already have a life where I am. And he said, it's like longing for another woman or another life, but not living the one you have. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And that was Wendell Berry. I just remembered that. He said it was about not spreading yourself too thin. And he said in that his part of Kentucky, he said, I already have that.
Yeah.
And he said, when I woke up this morning, there was one of the things, he said, walking down that river, I thought, boy, I could live this life. I could be
I've
here.
done the same thing.
Yeah.
Louisiana was a big draw for me.
Louisiana's big,
It is
man.
a big draw for me, but yeah, my roots, man, I'm like one of those white oaks. I mean, these are where my roots are.
Yeah.
And I've searched for words as a writer to really describe that connection, and I don't know if I've ever found them.
You know, that's a spiritual discipline as well.
Yeah.
It to take that and live that is a spiritual discipline. Because the world asks us to be thin.
Yeah.
It
does. And
you ever read Harry Crews?
No, I haven't.
Read a biography of a place called Childhood, a biography of a place
You
about
suggested
South Georgia.
that book to me, and I haven't read it yet.
He had this thing, and he said, the world would have me sit in front of the window and eat cotton candy all day. He said, I have to choose a disciplined path.
That's good.
The other one, excuse me, the other one was, which didn't take but about a half a second before you had that one, was Daniel Woodrell's work from the Missouri Ozarks. And that book I was thinking about was Winter's Bone.
Okay, I've read that book and I've watched the movie.
Yeah,
and then we talked about Woe to Live On.
Well, Woe to Live On is the seminal text.
Yes,
of Daniel Woodrell.
It's one of the best books I've ever read. But yeah, he and his writing. We talked about why that resonated so much with me. You and I did, and that's because that's my people.
Yeah,
I mean, his words sound just like they came from someone I know personally.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. And that's about my favorite Civil War book of ever. Is Woe to Live On.
I told you I read it in one day. I picked it up one morning and I couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
I finished it.
Well,
amazing book.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to going back and forth. I got a couple of books from you on this one, and I'll send you some stuff back.
Do that.
But this has been a hell of a visit, man.
It has.
I had a great time.
I've enjoyed it.
Well, Johnny, keep in touch with me, man. I'm gonna sign off. I appreciate your association too. I know you went to Rio Grande del Norte, right?
Yes.
With backcountry hunters and anglers.
Yeah.
And that is not. We didn't start out with that connection. You were a natural. I think you just were natural fit for backcountry hunters and anglers. Being a backcountry hunter and angler in Arkansas all your life. But doing this podcast with you, it's actually highly unusual that these two paths would converge this far out. It's just the fact that that's your thing, and they recognize that too as a looking for writers, you know.
Yeah, got to meet Katie McCallop out there, and Timothy Brass, good folks.
Yeah. So come see us out there, man. And I'll come back here.
Looking forward to it.
See you.
All right.
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 See you.
All right.